What's up, guys, and welcome to my ranking of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. With the release of Deadpool and Wolverine, we now have a whopping 34 movies in this franchise, so it's finally time to rank these bad boys from worst to best. We've got a lot of ground to cover here, so let's jump right into this, starting at number 34 on my list, which is Thor: The Dark World. And I feel like everyone I talk to either has this movie towards the bottom of their MCU list or absolutely dead last. And it's for a good reason. I mean, this movie is just so bland. Thor is pretty much one of the three main characters that the entire Infinity Saga is based around, and movies like this make me not want to spend time with that character at all, which is obviously not a good sign for a tentpole hero you're basing an entire section of Marvel movies off of. This movie might have the most run-of-the-mill and generic villain in Marvel history. I mean, it just did nothing for me. It's just another guy that wants to take over the universe. How exciting is that? And this villain kind of is a euphemism for this entire movie as a whole. I always say the worst insult you can give a film is calling it boring, because I mean, even if a movie is bad, you can still get some pretty decent entertainment out of it. Thor: The Dark World is pretty much like eating grilled chicken for dinner. I mean, no spices, no herbs, no sauces, just a naked piece of grilled chicken. You pretty much forget what you're eating while you're eating it. Coming in at number 33 is Captain Marvel, and this is just one of those MCU movies where I feel like I have no desire to ever revisit it. I mean, I've seen it once and that is enough for me. I've just never found Captain Marvel to be that likable of a character. And I mean, if we're talking about a superhero movie where I can't connect with the main character, you've already kind of lost me from the start there. We know this was supposed to be a kind of fish out of water tale where we're learning about and exploring this new civilization the same time the main character is, but it honestly felt like Brie Larson, the actress, was just on a different page than the production team. Her performance just didn't really seem to match the overall goal and vibe of the movie. To make matters worse, Marvel hasn't done a great job setting this hero up for success after her first introduction. So I can't even look back retroactively and be like, okay, we got movie 2 and movie 3, I can see where she started out, all of her character growth and what they did with her arc. No, I'm just left with this bad taste in my mouth. Now, there's obviously still time for redemption in the future, but they've got a lot of work to do, because coming in at number 32 is The Marvels, and this might be the most rushed and scatterbrained entry in the entirety of the MCU. Like, this is an absolute speed run of a movie, to the point where if you ever got up to go to the bathroom during this film, odds are by the time you got back, you'd either see our characters on a completely different universe, or you'd start seeing the credits rolling. This one is such a frustrating experience because I actually think the dynamic between our three leads here is pretty solid. Iman Vellani is an absolute star in the making with her performance as Miss Marvel. Her natural charisma and enthusiasm about joining the Marvel Cinematic Universe really works well for her character. And watching her having to balance her time between saving the world and her schoolwork gives her a little bit of that Peter Parker relatability. But bad writing, terrible visual effects, and having arguably the franchise's most forgettable villain all combined to make this film one of the worst we've ever gotten. Coming in at number 31 is Iron Man 2, and this is definitely one of the more confusing misfires in the MCU because it had the same team, cast, and crew behind it, which made the first one such a smash hit, both critically and with audiences. So I mean, what went wrong? The problem is that it's pretty much just a vehicle to set up an Avengers movie. The script here is just a total mess. I mean, I feel like in the first 30 minutes of its runtime, it just introduces so many new characters, plot lines, and conflicts. There's just not enough time in this film to fully address all of those in a succinct way. Also, I am just not a fan of Mickey Rourke's whiplash villain role in this film. I mean, it's like someone just told him to do the worst Jack Sparrow impression he can do, but only drunker. I know that's kind of hard to imagine. Coming in at number 30 is Thor: Love and Thunder. And I was positive, like a lot of people I think, that after seeing Thor Ragnarok, I knew this movie was gonna be awesome. We're talking like top 5 level of the MCU as a whole. Taika Waititi came into this franchise, did such a good job doing a 180 with this character. He made Thor funny, he made him entertaining, something that I think he was really lacking from those first 2 films. And then I saw the movie. Yeah, I was wrong. What made Ragnarok so good is that it threw out all of these different tones at us, but it was able to balance them expertly. Like, there were some laugh out loud funny moments, there were emotional moments, there were badass moments, but they never combated or butt heads with each other. Yeah, that's not the case with Thor: Love and Thunder. It's an all-out shitty comedy. I left the theater proclaiming that if I never hear another screaming goat again, it'll still be too soon. And then my mom got me this little desk ornament. It follows me everywhere. But seriously, if you have Christian Bale as the villain in your Marvel film and you only give him like 7 minutes on screen, you should probably be facing jail time. Coming in at number 29 is Ant-Man and the Wasp, and I feel like I don't have that many particular bad things to say about this movie, but it just doesn't really do all that much to stand out. I also love the first Ant-Man film, and I feel like this one just gave me less of everything that was in that movie. Less creativity, less gags, less emotion. So, I don't know, it just didn't really do that much for me. Another thing I always think about when I think of this movie, and obviously this isn't the film's fault, but this is the first Marvel movie to come out after Infinity War. Yeah, my expectations might have been set a little bit too high after seeing a movie like that. That was one of the most all-out, insane, bonkers superhero movies of all time. And then we get a much more contained, smaller heist story. I don't know. And I have no problem admitting that that is my problem as an audience member with this one. But yeah, I mean, this movie is entertaining. It has its laugh out loud funny moments. Seeing little shit turn big and big shit turn little never stops being entertaining. But I just don't really revisit this one. Coming in at number 28 is Eternals. And really the only thing that felt eternal about this movie was its runtime, because I did not think this shit was ever gonna end. But in all seriousness, this is just a classic case of a movie trying to do way too much. I mean, they introduced us to like 10 new characters and tried to get us to care about all of them. Usually when a movie does that, I end up caring about none of them. And that was even before we found out that they were basically a bargain bin Walmart version of the Justice League. This movie has a really good cast. It has a really good director in Chloe Zhao, and I wouldn't mind her getting another crack at a sequel here, but this movie just made a lot of choices that I just didn't vibe with. And when Harry Styles walked out in the post-credit scene, my eyes nearly rolled out of my skull. Coming in at number 27 is The Incredible Hulk, and I feel like this movie gets a bad rap from people, and I mean, I know it's still towards the bottom of my rankings, and it's seen as the oddball in the MCU, mostly because it's Ed Norton playing Bruce Banner and not Mark Ruffalo, but I don't think this movie gets enough credit for being a lot of fun. The situations they put the Hulk in are pretty creative, and the action sequences he's involved in are very entertaining, and I just love that overall darker tone to the film. It's a lot different than the modern day MCU. I mean, I don't know if there's an out of place joke in this thing. The storyline is a little bit messy and some of the performances leave something to be desired, but at the end of the day, I mean, this portrayal of Hulk is a lot closer to what I want him to be than what we're getting right now in the MCU. Coming in at number 26 is Black Widow, and first things first, this movie was just made like 5 years too late. I mean, us audience members hadn't even finished burying her after seeing her die in the main MCU timeline, so getting this prequel adventure seemed a little unnecessary. But this movie is at its most fun when it really explores that family dynamic that it has. I mean, the supporting cast members they give us in this film, Rachel Weisz, David Harbour, Florence Pugh, it is all top tier talent. But unfortunately, the way they handled Taskmaster, one of my favorite comic book villains, just cannot be ignored. It was used as a plot device more than anything else. I mean, Marvel really fumbled the bag there. On top of that, some of the CGI doesn't really look like it's where it needs to be, but it's a fun enough adventure. I don't know, it doesn't really push the needle either direction. Don't really have too much of a motivation to rewatch it. Coming in at number 25 is Iron Man 3, and what a segue this is after talking about Black Widow and the bad villain in that movie, because this movie has two bad villains. I mean, first we have the Mandarin, right, who's basically just an actor pretending to be a villain. I mean, what was the idea behind that shit? How did anyone ever think that was going to be a satisfying decision? And then we have Aldrich Killian, who basically just stole the storyline from the Riddler in Batman Forever. He's just some guy in the workplace that gets embarrassed by his boss, then his only personality trait is just to get revenge on him. I mean, Jesus. I do enjoy, though, that we get to spend a lot of time in this movie with Tony Stark away from his suit and really deal with his PTSD and what's going on behind the mask. But this narrative just takes so many twists and turns, and it seems for the sake of taking twists and turns that it really takes me out of the film and it just rubs me the wrong way. Coming in at number 24 is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and this might be the most incorrectly titled Marvel movie we've ever gotten, because he probably spends like, what, 40 seconds traveling through the multiverse? But I'm always game to see a movie directed by the twisted genius that is Sam Raimi. I mean, he always brings his same signature trademarks to every movie where he's behind the camera. It's weird, it's funny, it's just flat out bizarre, and he definitely brings those to this movie. I do feel like this one is a lot more about the vibes and the whole experience than the plot itself, because I feel like the plot is pretty messy here, and a lot of it didn't have a ton of payoff for me personally. And I gotta say, I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but the whole Illuminati sequence was just way too fan servicey for me. It just felt like they wanted to give people more cameos and more alterations of already existing characters to make them cheer and give them what they came for. I mean, they even let Twitter cast John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic. It was too much. Cap this whole thing off with Captain Carter saying she could do this all day, and then we quickly find out that she actually, in fact, cannot do this all day, and my eyes were rolling a little bit. I did really dig that music fight, though. And Elizabeth Olsen is an absolute triumph in this movie as Scarlet Witch. They need to greenlight her solo project immediately. Coming in at number 23 is Thor. And the first question that comes to mind is who told Chris Hemsworth it was a good idea for him to bleach his eyebrows? Because it wasn't a good idea. Now, there's a lot of good stuff in this movie, but one thing it doesn't do well is balance the two very different tones that it presents through this story. I mean, one part is a mythic adventure that takes place in Asgard. It's larger than life. But then when Thor comes to Earth, I mean, it's like the Marvel version of Coming to America. It gets all quirky and goofy on us. Outside of that, though, I do still think this is one of the better looking Marvel movies. And then Tom Hiddleston as Loki, he is exceptional per usual. His character's dynamic with the character of Thor always brings the emotion to these stories. But outside of that, I mean, I just don't think there's that much to latch on to. Coming in at number 22 is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. And I feel like this movie skyrocketed in anticipation for everybody once we figured out that it was gonna be the first Phase 5 movie. Not only that, but we were getting introduced to the new big bad, the new Thanos of the next chapter of the MCU, Kang the Conqueror. It also felt like Ant-Man was overdue for his biggest and most cosmic adventure yet, promising a very emotional and entertaining experience. So did it deliver on all of those things? I mean, I've seen some people describe this one as a Saturday morning cartoon, and I do think that's a pretty good way of explaining it. Like, it's a wacky sci-fi adventure with a world unlike our own. It's very entertaining, but then it ends and you don't really feel anything, but then you're probably ready for another helping. If you like your sci-fi and you like it weird, you'll probably enjoy this movie more than most. I mean, I'm talking weird like if the guys that like to hang out in the Star Wars cantina had a baby with Floops Fooglies from Spy Kids, that kind of weird. But I dug it. On the negative side, though, I didn't really love the way they balanced some of the characters in this film. Like, I didn't love the way Cassie Lang was portrayed and what they had her doing during the film. And then on the other hand, I don't think they had any idea what to do with Evangeline Lilly and Michael Douglas. I also think they kind of shot themselves in the foot when it came to the high stakes of this movie. Like, towards the end of the film, when Kang and Ant-Man are facing off and the portal breaks, preventing him from getting home, it took Cassie Lang, 2 seconds to make a new portal? Like, what was I worried about? Also, they nerfed Kang. Coming in at number 21 is Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, and very rarely is a film dealt this shit of a hand during its production. I mean, it filmed during a pandemic, and then on top of that, the lead actor of the franchise passed away very tragically, and they still found a way to progress the narrative forward while also finding a way to commemorate and honor the legacy of Chadwick Boseman. I do think the movie is a little too long, and the plot can get messy and bloated at times, but if you look at some of the content that Marvel was putting out in Phase 4 compared to Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, I mean, this movie did a really nice job at ending Phase 4 on a high note. Ryan Coogler clearly knows how to direct the shit out of these Black Panther movies. I hope he gives us another one. The stakes were just as high as they needed to be, and I really enjoyed a lot of the new characters they introduced this time around, especially Namor, who ended up being one of the more complex villains we've gotten in Marvel in a long time. Coming in at number 20 is Spider-Man: Far From Home. Yes, this is the lowest rated I have a Spider-Man movie on this list, but I'm just a total sucker for this character and the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man in general, even though he is wicked far away from his neighborhood. Now, is the plot of this movie incredibly stupid? I mean, yeah, kinda. When you boil it down, it's all about a teenager that's not really all that responsible yet, and he gets entrusted with a pair of sunglasses that can pretty much alter the world's safety, so yeah, it's not that great in the writing department. But the character of Peter Parker and Spider-Man are always just so relatable and fun, and if you know me at all, you know that I love watching Jake Gyllenhaal cook. And as Mysterio, boy does he cook. This movie is at its most fun and entertaining when both of them are sharing the screen and have a good banter and during all of their action sequences. I mean, this is a popcorn movie through and through. I'd probably have this movie ranked lower if there weren't already other movies in the MCU that develop and progress Spider-Man's story better, but since there already are, I mean, I'm just able to sit back and have a fun time with this one. Coming in at number 19 is Avengers: Age of Ultron, and when you compare this one to the original Avengers film, I feel like it just shows you that bigger isn't always better, but it can still be pretty good. This one has actually grown on me a decent bit after some more rewatches, and I actually think it's becoming one of my most underrated MCU movies. And a big part of that is James Spader's performance as the villain Ultron in this movie. I mean, I think he is one of the best villains we've ever gotten in a Marvel movie. He just comes off as so threatening and imposing, and the end goal he wants to achieve is actually more relevant now than it was when this movie came out. I mean, AI and robots taking over the human race. That could happen now more than ever. Is the plot messy? Yes. Does it move way too fast? Yes. But I'm still able to have a pretty good deal of fun with it, and there are some great individual moments packed into this movie. Coming in at number 18 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Sure, it's not as good as that first movie, but it's still able to carry over a ton of that fun, energy, and emotion, so how could I complain? This is another one of these movies on this list that was a lot lower when it first came out, but after a lot of subsequent rewatches and thinking about it more, I mean, I just seem to like this movie a lot more as time goes on. Where this one brings the emotion and really tugs at your heartstrings this time around is when it explores that father-son dynamic between Ego and Peter and Yondu and Peter, and that plays out on the screen beautifully. But yeah, this is a pretty solid package overall, any way you look at it. The soundtrack is good, the visuals are good, the gags are good, and it really let the cultural icon that is Baby Groot flourish. Coming in at number 17 is Black Panther, and if I had to describe this movie in one word, it would be rich. You know, rich characters, rich themes, rich culture, rich setting. All of that culminates to create a really nice and thought-provoking superhero movie experience. Chadwick Boseman is able to embody the role of T'Challa and Black Panther so well, but I love Michael B. Jordan as Eric Killmonger in this movie. He just plays a really good layered villain where you don't agree with how he goes about a lot of the stuff that he does, but you still kind of want to see what he's going to do next. This is still one of the best directed Marvel movies we've ever gotten, and it definitely has one of the clearest visions as well. Ryan Coogler just proves that he is a force to be reckoned with whenever he's behind the camera. Coming in at number 16 is Doctor Strange, and this is probably the closest thing we're ever going to get to a Christopher Nolan directed Marvel movie, because the visuals are just off the wall bonkers in this film. I mean, yeah, this movie definitely still suffers from problems around the predictable Marvel formula, but it's just so interesting and entertaining watching a character like Stephen Strange, who's this pompous and arrogant surgeon. He gets knocked down a peg and finds himself in a very dark place in his life, and he's able to find the strength within himself to transform into one of the characters we now know and love as Doctor Strange. When it comes to the performances, I mean, Benedict Cumberbatch is another one of those goated casting choices by Marvel. I really think he embodies everything about this character perfectly, but one thing I cannot forgive is casting someone like Mads Mikkelsen, one of my favorite actors of all time, and making him one of these cookie-cutter predictable villains. That I can't ignore. Outside of that though, I do think this is a very entertaining Marvel movie, and definitely because of the visuals, makes it very rewatchable. Coming in at number 15 is Spider-Man Homecoming, and this is just such a fun and entertaining introduction for Spider-Man into the MCU, and a big reason of why they were able to pull this off is they didn't lose sight of the best tool that Spider-Man has at his disposal. He is relatable as all hell. There's just always going to be something addicting about the fact that we know Spider-Man is going to spend as much time worrying about saving the world as he is passing one of his biology exams or something. I always love a good team-up scenario, so I really enjoy those mentor scenes with Tony Stark in here, and Michael Keaton absolutely kills it as the Vulture. Coming in at number 14 is Deadpool and Wolverine, and look, even though I'm someone that thinks the multiverse can open up the possibility to lazy writing and creating storylines with low stakes, seeing his characters can pretty much be resurrected at will, I will happily abandon my morals for a couple hours if it means I get a raunchy road trip movie with those comic-accurate yellow spandex. Filled to the brim with intense action, non-stop comedy, and ridiculous cameos, from an entertainment standpoint alone, it'll be hard to find a movie in this franchise that puts more of a smile on your face from beginning to end if you're a die-hard comic book nerd. It might not have the most meaningful or complex story at its disposal, but watching Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman continue their time as these two characters that they were so clearly born to play will always be a treat, especially when it signifies their introduction into this universe. This movie pretty much gives you absolutely everything you're expecting out of it and nothing more, which isn't a bad thing. Sometimes a messy, bloody, and funny surface-level team-up between two of the best heroes the MCU now has in their arsenal is just what the Doctor ordered, and if that's ever the case, I will happily take a second helping. Coming in at number 13 is Captain America: The First Avenger, and this is just such an awesome underdog story, and it's one of my favorite origins in the entire MCU. They just really nailed this World War II setting, and it's super entertaining seeing the character of Steve Rogers never give up and doing everything he can to rise through the ranks, and eventually becoming the icon we know him as today. Now, when the story strays away from that and focuses a little bit more on the Red Skull, it definitely gets a little bit more muddled and sporadic, but other than that, I mean, just following this character, Steve Rogers, I find to be such such a fulfilling and satisfying experience. Captain America has been my favorite Marvel character for a very long time, so I was pumped to see how well he was portrayed in this origin story, so I knew they were laying the foundation well from the start, and he was only going to grow into a better character as time went on. Also, Chris Evans, fellow Boston guy, so you know I have no complaints there. Coming in at number 12 is Ant-Man, and I feel like everyone was a little bit skeptical when we heard that Paul Rudd was getting cast as an Avenger. I mean, obviously, everybody loves Paul Rudd, but it just seemed like a strange concept. I had to admit, I didn't have a ton of experience with the character of Ant-Man. God, did he come in here and just crush that role. This movie is just such a welcome and nice change of pace within the MCU, especially when you look at the movies that were coming before this. They were all big and very serious superhero movies. This one is small in scale, it's self-aware, it's basically just the MCU's heist movie. It is a blast from start to finish. At the end of the day, I think this is one of the most funny, creative, and wholesome projects that Marvel has ever done, and they really took a risk because no one knew who Ant-Man was if you were a casual fan, and by the end of it, because of Paul Rudd's charisma, you felt like you've known this guy for like 40 years. Coming in at number 11 is Shang-Chi in The Legend of the Ten Rings, and I feel like this phrase kind of gets thrown around a lot by Marvel fans about different movies in the franchise, but for me, this is the movie that really doesn't feel like a Marvel film. The reason for that is because in most MCU outings, we see our characters fighting against something technologically based, right? It's very rooted in sci-fi, maybe an alien, maybe a robot. But in this movie, it's very mythologically based. They're fighting against dragons, and I love that. Now, one thing you can't ignore when you talk about this movie is the fight sequences. It has some of the best fight sequences I've ever seen in a Marvel movie. It has awesome hand-to-hand combat, weapon-based combat, you name it, it's all in here, and it is so visually stunning. This movie just does so much stuff right, especially with that villain role. Here's Marvel again exploring that father-son, child-parent relationship, and it really adds a nice sophisticated layer to our main character's struggle. But the most surprising thing this movie was somehow able to pull off was redeeming the Mandarin character in Iron Man 3. I hated that character. I never wanted to see him again in another Marvel movie, and now after this movie, I love the guy. Coming in at number 10 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and this entry proves to me that movies really are magic because it had the power to put a pit in my stomach and have me crying over a CGI raccoon. These Guardians movies always bring such an insanely high level of entertainment, heart, and fun to them. I mean, no one wanted to say goodbye to this group of heroes. Even people that don't really enjoy the MCU as a whole usually love these Guardians movies, and for the right reasons. And everything you like about this band of characters is here yet again in this final entry in the trilogy. This cast continues to just work together effortlessly. I mean, I keep saying that even if you took all of them and put them together in a 1920s silent film, they would somehow still find a way to make that chemistry ooze out of the screen. The real star of the show here is obviously Rocket. I mean, we get a peek behind the curtain and see his heartbreaking origin story. At the end of the day, this movie has everything in it you would want a send-off for the Guardians of the Galaxy to have in it. Great heart, great action, great music. This is the type of Marvel movie where I can only see it going up in my rankings after rewatches, so I'm looking forward to seeing where it's going to end up maybe even a year from now. Coming in at number 9 is The Avengers, and my God, seeing this in theaters was a monumentous occasion. I honestly think this one is ranked so highly on my list, more so because of what it means within the MCU as a whole. As we watched Phase 1 slowly take shape within the solo films of our three main heroes, everyone knew it was inevitable. An Avengers movie was coming down the pipeline at some point, and the fact that they were able to pull it off and execute it so successfully, comic book nerds everywhere let out a sigh of relief, and it kind of let us know bigger and better things are coming in the future. This is obviously without question the smallest Avengers movie we've ever gotten, and that's exactly what I like about it. The story is very simple and straightforward, but all of our heroes still get a moment to shine in the spotlight. In that third act, they pull out all the stops. That New York City fight scene has become iconic. Coming in at number 8 is Iron Man, the one that started it all. And one of the reasons this movie is just so good is it doesn't yet carry the weight of being in a massive franchise. We've seen some past Marvel movies really suffer and buckle under the pressure of having to manage past storylines, future storylines, cameos, conflicts. Yeah, That's not a problem here. This movie is the OG. It's the one out there calling the shots. This is one of those rare occurrences where I actually believe that there is no one living on this planet right now that would be able to play this role of Tony Stark and Iron Man better than Robert Downey Jr. He's just able to bring such an effortless level of charisma to the screen. He displays all of his character's flaws, but still makes him likable and you want to root for him. I mean, this is just creme de la creme levels of superhero casting. I really never see this movie falling out of my top 10 in my Marvel rankings. I mean, the entertainment factor is through the roof. The action set pieces are awesome, and I still think the visuals look top notch. This is the perfect film to kick off a saga like this, and I'll never forget walking out of the theater after seeing it, just fantasizing about what the hell is gonna come next. Coming in at number 7 is Spider-Man No Way Home, and this movie is just such a great example of a film that is layered in fan service and nostalgia that is still able to find a way to push the narrative and character arcs forward. Even though the setup of the plot is pretty flimsy and it really only exists to get all three of these Spider-Men together in the same place at the same time, once that does happen, there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of conflict, and it's just entertaining as all hell. I'm a diehard Tobey guy through and through, so I was absolutely losing my shit seeing him back on screen in the spandex. But the fact that this theater experience was able to rival that of something like an Endgame or an Infinity War just shows how much people absolutely love this character, and this will definitely go down as one of the best theater experiences I've ever had in my entire life. Coming in at number 6 is Thor Ragnarok, and even though I have some choice words to say about Love and Thunder, I will always be grateful to Taika Waititi for giving us this film. He just understood the assignment perfectly here. He took a character like Thor, who was pretty much on life support as far as I'm concerned, and completely brought him back from the dead. Waititi just went in there, took a lot of risks, made the character do a lot of stuff he hadn't been doing in the past, and it just happened to really work. Pair that with Chris Hemsworth's natural comedic ability, and it was just a total slam dunk. This character of Thor was one of my least favorite in the entire MCU. This movie alone shot him up to being one of my favorites. This film just hits on so many different angles for me. It's funny, it's entertaining, it's very rewatchable. It pretty much has the Hulk going back to being a rage monster again. It has a great villain in Cate Blanchett, and there is still a ton of fun Loki action to be had. Coming in at number 5 is Guardians of the Galaxy, and I really feel like this film just has a way of transcending the vibes of the MCU. Like, you could meet someone on the street that says they hate all of the Marvel movies, and they'd still be like, I mean, I love Guardians of the Galaxy, obviously. This film showcases just how insanely talented James Gunn is as a movie director here, because he's able to take this ragtag group from a very obscure comic that not a lot of casual fans even know exists, and put them not only into a smash hit of a movie, but turns them into a household name. Making this movie was definitely a massive risk on Marvel's part. I mean, two of the main characters are a snarky raccoon and a walking, talking tree, so it's kind of mind-blowing that they were able to pull this one off to this degree. Kinda hate that that rhymed, but we're keeping it in there. This movie just has absolutely everything you could possibly want in a big blockbuster superhero movie. Great action, great soundtrack, great visuals, great characters, and to top it all off, it has the most heart out of any MCU movie we've ever gotten. Coming in at number 4 is Avengers Endgame. This movie is just the definition of epic. Everybody knows it, everybody loves it, but one thing this movie does so well is that it kind of subverted our expectations a little bit. Like, we all knew this was going to be the end to a massive saga, so somehow our remaining heroes were going to find a way to kick Thanos' ass. But what we didn't know is that halfway through the film, it was going to turn into like a time travel heist movie. It just cannot be overstated how impressive this movie is more than anything, that it's able to balance all of the characters, storylines, conflicts, all of that stuff that has happened in the 23 films leading up to this culmination point. This is such a satisfying payoff to this entire journey, and they leave us with one of the best third acts of all time, and being a diehard Captain America fan, it had me ready to run through a brick wall. Coming in at number 3 is Captain America Civil War, and I feel like whenever we see these movies that pins two heroes against each other, usually the plot is super flimsy and convenient just so we can skip ahead to the good part and see them battle it out. But what sets this movie apart is that the story is surprisingly layered, and it creates a believable reason for Captain America and Iron Man to be on opposing sides, and you already know who I'm siding with. This movie just has so much crammed into it. It introduces Spider-Man, it introduces Black Panther, it furthers a bunch of interwoven storylines, and it gives us one of the best action sequences ever put to screen in that airport fight scene. I could watch Ant-Man go jumbo and toss guys around like a rag doll all damn day. Coming in at number 2 is Avengers Infinity War, and this movie really just feels like such a reward to the fans after after years and years of movies leading up to this massive event. Like, I already love so many of the standalone MCU projects already, but seeing your favorite characters interact with one another and fight side by side, I mean, it just made paying attention to this saga so much more worth it. Thanos is out here strutting his stuff this time around and gives you absolutely everything you could possibly want in an epic movie villain. He's larger than life, he's a force to be reckoned with, and he's gonna stop at nothing until he completes his goal. Pair all of that with a final act that left me with my jaw on the floor and dying to know what's gonna happen next, and it was clear that they pulled off the best large-scale superhero team-up movie of all time. Coming in at number 1 is Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and this movie is so spectacular because it showed me that Marvel movies can be more than just superhero films. Take away Captain America's shield, and this is a drop-dead political thriller spy movie from front to back. It's got double crossings, it's got disguises, it's got secret government deals. This is basically what would happen if you gave Jason Bourne blue spandex. The reveal of Bucky Barnes being the Winter Soldier holds some real emotional weight to it too. Like, now that's the only link Steve Rogers has to his old life that was taken away from him way too soon. Not to mention that the fight sequences in this movie are some of the most entertaining out of any action movie I've ever seen. Especially that highway sequence where the Winter Soldier takes on Cap, Black Widow, and Falcon all by himself. The hand-to-hand combat is intense, the camera doesn't cut away, and it just feels like there's real stakes. And that's only a few reasons of why this movie has been in my number 1 spot for almost a decade now, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. So there you have it, guys, my ranking of all 34 movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now you know how my list looks, but I want to hear how yours shakes out. Let me know in the comments below, how would you rank this entire franchise from front to back? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys at the next one.